Let's take a look at our national debt. Now, it makes sense to me to study our national debt when we study Congress, because Congress has a lot of financial powers. Congress has the power to tax. Congress has the power to borrow money. Congress also has to authorize all spending. So when we look at our national debt, really I think Congress deserves a lion's share of the blame, because without Congress there would be no spending and there would be no borrowing. Now the president probably deserves some blame too, because the president could veto spending bills. And the president also requests money, but he can't initiate the spending. So even though he may deserve some of the blame, probably Congress deserves much, much more. And you know what? Truthfully, probably us as the American people deserve blame too, because we like to have stuff. We like to have good roads. We like to have a great military. But we don't always want to pay for that stuff. So maybe we're somewhat to blame for it too. Let's look at our national debt. First of all, as of today, according to the U.S. national debt clock, we are $17.7 trillion in debt. $17.7 trillion, an unbelievably high number. What exactly is a trillion? Well, I found this on Google SketchUp, and I think it's done to scale, and it gives us like some idea. If you'd have $10,000 in $100 bills, it would look like about the size of a deck of playing cards. So this is about $10,000, and if you would put 100 packets together, that would equal $1 million. This is a man standing, this is through Google SketchUp, to scale of what it would look like standing near $1 million in $100 packets. Okay, $100 million would look like this, kind of like a crate of cash. $1 billion would look like this. Again, a large amount of cash. So what's $1 trillion look like? According to this, $1 trillion would look like this. This is the guy right down here in the corner. These are the crates of cash. What I want to get across is $1 trillion is a huge amount of money. We are 17 trillion in debt. How do we get there? Well, let's look at a scenario here. Let's do a situation here. Let's just say that you have $1,000 in income. That's what your monthly income is. And let's say that you have a number of expenses. You have rent, you have utilities, you have groceries and cell phones and internet and cable TV and a car loan and this other stuff, shampoo, laundry, detergent, things like that. And then your entertainment, whatever you do for entertainment, that's throwing another 200. And you have a hobby, a strange hobby. You collect gum balls. And you spend $100 a year on a month, on a gumball collection. Now, if you add all this stuff up, you're making $1,000, but you're spending actually $1,900. So you have a deficit of $900. A deficit is when you are spending more money than you're taking in a given period of time. Okay, so in this particular month, you have a $900 deficit. So how do you make that up? Well, in our scenario, let's say that you just take out your credit card and you pay off that deficit with your credit card, that extra $900. But that's accumulating debt. You have to pay that credit card back plus interest. So deficit spending is simply when we spend more money than we take in a given period of time. So we are deficit spending in this particular month here in our scenario. Now you're in debt. Now you had your car loan from before, and now you've just added your credit card bill. So you had $15,000 in car loans. Now you added $900 in your credit card. So now your debt is $15,900. Think of your deficit as being your debt is the accumulation of all your deficits. Okay, so let's do the second month comes along, and you have the exact same expenses. Okay, plus you have a $50 credit card payment. We'll say that's your minimum payment on your credit card. So now what you have is total expenses of $1,950 this month. Your deficit then is $950. So again, you use your credit card to pay off the difference. So now you have a $15,000 car loan plus a $900 deficit that you paid off with your credit card the month before, plus a $950. And we're not going to worry about interest or anything like that at this particular time. Just a simple explanation here. So now your total debt is $16,850. We're looking at our debt, and this is our scenario. If we are making $1,000, but we're spending $1,950 a month, obviously we can't go on doing this forever. So what options do we have? Well, we could increase our income. We could get a second job or find another job that pays more. And if we can do that, that can pay off, or we could eliminate our deficit spending, or we could decrease spending. We could cut things out that we don't think are necessary. Or we could do some kind of combination of the two, make cuts somewhere along the way and increase our income. So if we looked at this, what can we cut? Well, let's say that there are some things that we just can't cut. We'll call those things mandatory spending. By law, they can't be cut, is what we look at mandatory spending. Well, in here, we'll say that groceries, rent, utilities, things that we have to have. Let's say that we have a year-long lease, so we can't get out of that. Obviously, we have to pay our garbage and our water and our utilities. They won't let us go for free. So we'll call some of those things. That car loan is an agreement that we got into with a lending company, so we have to pay those back. Those are our mandatory spending. We can't cut mandatory. So we can't cut the rent, we can't cut this, we can't cut this, we can't cut this. We can cut the rest of it, though. Those things that we can cut, that's called discretionary spending. That way, those are things in which we have the choice if we want to cut or not. Some of those things seem like an easy cut. $100 in gumball collection, that seems like it's just wasteful spending. But the rest of the stuff becomes more difficult. The cell phone, well, we can cut the cell phone, but we may make an argument that we need the cell phone. Maybe it's our only form of communication. Maybe we do work on it because it's a smartphone. We could cut the internet, but maybe we really like that. We could get rid of cable TV. We could cut shampoo and toothpaste and deodorant, but it's not really a practical cut. Some of the things that are discretionary spending are things that we can cut, but we can't practically cut. We don't have to have toothpaste and deodorant and shampoo, but those are things that we really do need to have. Some cuts can be easy when it comes to discretionary spending, and sometimes the cuts are very difficult. Nonetheless, we can cut discretionary spending. We cannot cut mandatory spending. So what is all this stuff? Well, let's get some definitions. The deficit is simply the amount that the government spends more than the revenue that it takes in. That's what is a deficit. And the debt, then, is the accumulation of all our deficits. When we get a loan to pay off our deficits, that gives us what we call is our debt. Okay, so that's accumulation of the deficits, or the loans that we've taken out to pay off those deficits. Mandatory spending are things that we have to spend money on. Discretionary spending are things that we don't have to spend money on, but some of those things are really important. Entitlements are things that are like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. Entitlements are not welfare. Entitlements are things that we pay in. Like I've been paying in Social Security for the last 20-some years, have I been working, 25 years. And the government has made a promise that I will get that money back. Those things can't be cut because the government has essentially is obligated to pay those things back by law. It's not a gift for me. It's money that I'm paying in that I deserve to get back. Those are entitlements, and those are basically untouchable. Those can't be cut either, or they're very unpopular cuts to make. So mandatory spending, entitlements fall under the mandatory spending thing. Discretionary spending is everything else. Okay? Everything that's not entitlements. Remember what we said our debt was? Our national debt is $17 trillion right now. Okay? Remember, $17.7 trillion. How did we get there? Well, we've spent more than we've taken in. And we've deficit spent for years. That's how we've got there. This shows the amount of debt we have and the amount of deficit spending we have. And it breaks it down by year, but also by president. Now, the president doesn't deserve the blame, but typically the presidents get the blame. Congress really deserves the blame. But if you look at it, the red is Republican presidents, the blue are Democratic presidents. it's not one party that has led to this debt. Both parties seem like they deserve equal blame for the debt that we have. This breaks down deficit spending from the Carter administration all through George W. Bush. Now, every time you see this graph below, or these charts below the line, that's when we deficit spend, when we've spent more money than we've taken in. Notice, Carter, we spent more. When Reagan was president, when George Bush the first was president, when Clinton was, until these years. We did have 4 years when we did not deficit spend. Now, it's just like you can't give the president all the blame when we're deficit spending. I don't think Bill Clinton deserves all the credit here either. Certainly, Congress at that time deserves some of the credit. We also had a time when we weren't at war. That's helpful. So we weren't doing military spending. Military costs a lot, and wars cost a lot. Well, what happened here? Well, 9/11 happened here. And 9/11 led to a great amount of spending here. And so we had 4 years when, that's not 4 years when we didn't have a debt. It's 4 years when we didn't have deficit spending, meaning that we had more money than we were spending in a given year. That gave us a surplus that we could use to start paying down some of the debt. Another slide here shows it through 2015. At least some of this is projected. Okay? And again, this goes back from 80, deficit spending, all except for those 4 years, and then deficit spending for as far as the eye can see. 2014, this is from the Congressional Budget Office. This shows the deficit in percentage of the GDP. Okay? $514 billion projected deficit, $539 billion. As far as we can see, we're still going to have a deficit. That means that not only aren't we going to be able to pay off that $17 trillion in debt, we're going to continue to add to that $17 trillion in debt. This is the 2013 proposed budget. The president proposes a budget. He gives it to Congress, and then Congress has to approve it, and they can make changes on it. Here's some of the things I wanted to show you. First of all, this blue shows the amount of income we have, and we get our income through taxes primarily. Social Security tax, income tax, corporate tax, excise tax, but basically taxes. This over here, the red, is showing our spending. Obviously, the spending is much, much greater than the income that we have. Okay? The mandatory spending are these things. Medicare and Medicaid is a huge chunk of mandatory spending. Social Security, another huge chunk. And this is the debt, the interest on our debt, the loans that we have to pay off. So what do we have left? Well, this is the discretionary. Now the defense, that's our military, is one chunk of the discretionary spending. We can cut the military, and we could reduce it down to zero. But that's not really realistic. It's kind of like saying we don't have to have shampoo. Well, yeah, we need some of those things like shampoo and toothpaste. Well, the military is something that, even though it falls under the discretionary heading, we really can't get rid of it. We can reduce it maybe some, but not, I don't think most Americans believe that we should reduce the military a lot. So that's discretionary, and this is everything else. This is national parks. This is our court system and our national prisons. This is money that goes to roads that the federal government gives the states. Everything else that the federal government spends money on is right here. This is our discretionary spending. We can't cut the mandatory spending. This is what's left, and really, we can only cut a fraction out of it. It's kind of disheartening. It's like, how do we get to a balanced budget? And the answer is, at least for me, I don't know. I don't know how we pay off that $17 trillion because I don't know how we get to a point where we don't have a deficit spending to begin with. And if we can't get to where we have no deficit spending, then I don't see how it's even practical to pay off the debt. This is the interest that we're paying on our debt. In 2009, $187 billion just on interest payments. So not only are we adding to the debt through more deficit spending, we're also adding to the debt from each loan that we get. We'll look into pork and other things in class, but just some idea of where we're at. Now, back to this scenario. Our scenario here is, well, what can we do to stop this? Well, we could increase income, or we could decrease spending, or a combination of the two. Well, in a national level, increasing income really means increasing taxes, which in the political climate that we're at today, it is really almost an impossibility. No one is really realistically believing that we can increase taxes very much. You just, in Congress, if you say you're going to raise taxes, you're pretty much guaranteed to lose the next election. So increasing taxes doesn't seem to be an option. Decreasing spending does. However, we can't agree on what to decrease or what to cut. And even those who agree that we need to decrease spending, a lot of people do, they don't necessarily agree with what that we need to cut. You know, we throw out that, well, let's cut wasteful spending. Well, we can do that. But wasteful spending in the terms of just pork barrel projects seems like it's just a very small fraction of all of our spending. So if we're going to really make cuts and get down to deficit spending, if we're not going to increase taxes, we're going to have to cut spending a ton. And I don't think at this time that we can agree on enough cuts to get down to no deficit. And if we can't agree on the cuts to get down to reduce our deficit, to eliminate our deficit, we can't even come close to addressing our national debt. So it seems like our net debt is going to be with us for a long time, with no real legitimate chance of eliminating